If you've ever wondered what would happen if a human walked into the most dangerous predator council in the galaxy with a pet, and walked out alive, then stick around, because this story will change how you think about Earth's animals forever. Before we dive in, hit that like button, drop a comment about the scariest animal you've ever seen, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter in humanity's ongoing saga among the stars. The station's glass ring promenade curved in a perfect arc around the gas giant below, a swirl of violet and white clouds churning endlessly in silence. Commander Rian Holt leaned on the railing, a mug of coffee in his hand, watching lightning flicker across the planet's upper atmosphere. The coffee was real, imported from Earth at ridiculous expense, and he sipped it slowly as if daring anyone to comment on the extravagance. In the reflection on the glass, he caught the familiar shapes of his alien colleagues drifting past, scaled, furred, feathered, and something between, all of them pretending they weren't glancing his way. They'd been doing that since breakfast, whispering behind their sensory fronds or telepathic veils, their voices carrying just enough for him to catch a word here and there, soft, domesticated, fragile. He'd heard it all before. Humans had a strange reputation out here, one that fascinated and confused other species. They respected humanity's persistence, its knack for survival, its sheer bloody-minded refusal to die when logic suggested otherwise. But they couldn't understand the one thing humans seemed obsessed with: keeping animals. Companions, Rian murmured to himself, swirling the last inch of coffee. Yeah, they're just friends to us. Scares the hell out of them. The promenade's central atrium was filling with representatives from a dozen worlds, banners displaying unfamiliar glyphs shimmering in the air above them. Today was the Intergalactic Cultural Exchange, and this year's theme was companion species. A harmless enough tradition in theory. Every species brought one or two creatures they considered culturally significant, not as livestock or war beasts, but as members of their home life. The event was supposed to build bridges, show that even apex predators could show tenderness to a smaller life form. For most species that meant something impressive. Rian had already seen a Jeskai sand prowler, 6 meters of rippling sinew and knife-edged mandibles, lounging on a heat pad while its handler stroked its armored hide. Across from it, a floating sphere of pale green jelly emitted soft harmonic tones, its tendrils curling happily around the claws of its crothery caretaker. Even the avian Zal had brought a bonded storm eagle, its wings folded neatly but its eyes sharp as plasma cutters. The humans, predictably, had a golden retriever named Sunny. Sunny sat panting happily at the end of Ensign Mallory's leash, tail sweeping the floor, occasionally accepting a treat with all the seriousness of an ambassador accepting a peace treaty. The aliens adored him, scratching his head, offering him alien-safe snacks, even crouching down to mimic his bark. But the murmurs had started almost immediately. They bring prey animals. Do they not understand companionship beyond protection? Cuddling is not survival. Jax, a broad-shouldered reptilian with scales like dark glass, slid up beside Rian and leaned casually on the railing. His voice was low and rasping, but there was humor in it. Your kind has a strange habit, Holt. You treat hunters as friends and prey as family. Better than eating everything smaller than you, Rian said without looking at him. Jax's head frills twitched. Perhaps. But a real companion should stand beside you in danger, not hide behind your legs. His slitted eyes shifted toward Sunny. That one would not last a minute on my homeworld. Rian sipped his coffee. Maybe that's not the point. Another voice broke in, sharper, mocking. There. The Enduran stood a head taller than Rian, covered in mottled fur the color of scorched copper, his jaw lined with carnivore's fangs. He was a member of the Predators Guild, and he never let anyone forget it. Humans, Varric said, drawing the word out like an insult. You travel the stars, you fight wars, you claim to be apex survivors, and yet you keep cuddle toys. His golden eyes glinted. Perhaps you fear a true predator would not obey you. Rian turned his head slowly, meeting Varric's stare. The background noise of the atrium faded, the unspoken challenge hanging between them. You want dangerous? Rian asked, his tone mild, almost lazy. I'll bring dangerous next time. Varric's grin widened, showing all his teeth. I will believe it when I see it. Nearby, Jax gave a soft rumble of amusement, but his gaze lingered on Rian a moment too long. He knew that tone. It was the same voice Rian had used back when they were deployed together, right before a mission went sideways for someone who wasn't him. The showcase went on, the atrium alive with exotic scents, alien languages, and the occasional low growl. Rian stayed on the fringe, answering polite questions, accepting a few barbed compliments, and filing away every sideways glance. By the time Sunny had successfully rolled over for the 5th time to the delight of the Zal ambassador, Rian had already made up his mind. When the event ended and the crowd dispersed, he didn't head back to his quarters. Instead, he made for the secure comm room, swiping his clearance badge with practiced ease. The heavy door sealed behind him, cutting off the station's ambient hum. He keyed in a private Earthlink frequency, the encryption layers taking long seconds to cycle through. When the connection solidified, a familiar face appeared: Dr. Cole Avery, field zoologist, wildlife rehab specialist, and one of the few people Rian trusted to keep his mouth shut. "You look like you've been chewed on," Cole said by way of greeting. "Not yet," Rian replied. "But I need a favor. Something with claws. Something that makes predators think twice." Cole's eyebrows lifted. "You're finally ready for that, huh?" "I'm ready," Rian said. "And I've got a year to get her here." Cole leaned back, a slow grin spreading across his weathered face. "I think I know just the animal. But you'd better be damn sure, this isn't a dog you can leash and forget about." Rian thought about Varric's grin, the way the aliens had laughed, the way Sunny had wagged obliviously. "I'm sure," he said. When the call ended, Rian stood for a moment in the quiet, feeling the weight of the decision settle in his bones. This wasn't about pride, not entirely. It was about respect. Humanity didn't keep animals because they were weak, or because they needed something harmless to soothe them. They kept them because they understood bonds, not just with each other but across species, across instincts, even across danger. And some bonds were worth the risk. A year was plenty of time. Time to plan, to arrange transport through the labyrinthine regulations, to prepare the station for something it had never hosted before. Time to make sure that when he returned, no one would mistake humanity's companions for toys again. He finished his coffee cold, staring out at the gas giant, its swirling storms lit by silent lightning. His reflection stared back, faint and ghost-like in the glass, the corners of his mouth curved in a thin, dangerous smile. "Let's see how they laugh next year," he murmured. And somewhere light years away, in the dense green shadows of an earth jungle, a pair of golden eyes blinked open in the dark. This ending sets up the hook for the next section while giving section 1 a complete, satisfying arc. The mockery, the promise, and the hint of the deadly companion to come. It's also paced so the YouTube intro feels organic, not tacked on. The station was restless. Even before the artificial dawn cycle bathed the promenade in pale light, there was movement in the corridors, low murmurs in alien tongues, security personnel posted at corners where they had never stood before. A year had passed since Rian Holt had made his quiet promise, and now whispers ran through the habitat decks like a current. He had brought something. Docking Bay 6 was off-limits to civilians. The air there was colder than the rest of the station, its climate controls tuned to the requirements of incoming live cargo. Behind layered shields and reinforced blast doors, a matte black crate stood on an anti-grav pallet, its surface stenciled with hazard glyphs in no fewer than 17 languages. Every warning was accompanied by an Earth symbol for danger, a stylized skull, white against black. The sound that came from inside was not loud, but it carried. A deep, resonant growl that bypassed the ears and went straight to the spine. Rian stood beside it, hands loose at his sides, his expression unreadable. He wore the station's formal duty blacks, the fabric pressed sharp, his boots polished. To one side, the station's chief of security adjusted the grip on her sidearm without realizing it. Her second eyelids blinked in rapid succession, a reflex she would have denied if anyone pointed it out. When the crate shifted slightly, the security team tensed. The growl deepened into a low, vibrating hum, and somewhere inside, claws scraped metal. "Still think it's a lap pet?" Rian's voice was quiet, but it carried enough to reach Varric, who stood 10 meters away. The Enduran's ears flattened in a gesture too quick for him to control before he forced a smirk back onto his muzzle. "I think you overcompensate," Varric replied, though his gaze never left the crate. "No creature from your garden world could unsettle me." "You're welcome to test that theory later," Rian said, his tone mild as ever. The showcase began 3 hours later. The main hall was fuller than it had ever been, species who had not attended in years suddenly finding urgent reasons to appear. The seating tiers rose in concentric arcs around a central display floor, lit from above by a halo of soft gold light. On the far side, a freight lift waited with the black crate. Sunny was there again, still the picture of unshakable canine joy, seated beside Ensign Mallory. The retriever had no idea that he had become the yardstick against which all human animals would now be measured. Rian didn't watch the earlier presentations. He let the alien handlers parade their bonded beasts, scaled flyers with wings like stained glass, armored quadrupeds that could crush a ground car underfoot, symbiotic plant creatures that swayed in time to a shared heartbeat. He heard polite applause, saw the appreciative tilts of predator heads and the reverent gestures of herbivore diplomats. When his turn came, the atmosphere shifted. The freight lift descended in near silence, the crate secured at its center. The moment it touched the display floor, the growl returned, not loud but deliberate. Every predator species in the room reacted the same way, a subtle bristling, a tightening of posture, a readiness that no one had commanded but that centuries of instinct demanded. The locks disengaged with a series of hydraulic clicks. The front panel hissed as it lowered, releasing a breath of cool, dense air from within. She stepped out with the unhurried grace of something that has never once doubted its place at the top of the food chain. Black fur drank in the light, every movement rippling across muscles shaped by wild terrain. Her paws were silent on the polished floor, her tail swaying in perfect balance. Eyes the color of molten gold fixed on the crowd, assessing without hurry. She patted to Rian's side, brushed her head against his thigh with the easy familiarity of a companion, and sat, her gaze never leaving the tiers of alien faces. The room was so still that the faint sound of her breathing was audible. Predator eyes narrowed in acknowledgement. Prey species leaned back instinctively. One of the Crothery storm eagles gave a low, uneasy cry and shifted on its handler's arm. Rian rested a hand lightly on the back of Nyx's neck. "This is Nyx," he said, voice calm. "She is not domesticated. She is not tamed. She has agreed to be here." Varric tilted his head. "And what persuades a wild predator to obey a human?" "Respect," Rian said simply. "And the understanding that neither of us wants to fight the other." Jax, seated 3 rows back, was watching with a new intensity, his frills angled forward. He had never seen Holt's face like this, quiet, controlled, but with that faint, dangerous glint in the eyes. It was the look of a man who had just placed his opponent on the back foot before the real contest began. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some of it was awe, some disbelief, and some the grudging recognition that what they were seeing was not an illusion. A few still thought it was staged, until Nyx turned her gaze on them. Her stare was not a threat, it was a measure, as if deciding how far she would need to move to reach them. The endurance smirk faltered. Varric leaned back a fraction, claws tapping the armrest. "She is adequate," he said, though the strain in his voice betrayed him. "But beauty does not prove utility." "Utility?" Rian let the word hang for a moment. "You mean survival?" "On any world worth the name," Varric said, regaining some composure, "a companion's worth is measured by whether it can stand in the hunt or the fight." Rian's lips curved. "You're in luck. We'll have that opportunity soon enough." Nyx rose in a single fluid motion, pacing once in a slow circle around Rian before settling again, her tail curling neatly. She wasn't posturing. She didn't need to. The way she moved was enough to convey what she was, built to kill and choosing not to. The formalities of the showcase continued, but the energy had shifted permanently. Conversations were quieter, eyes flicked more often toward the black shape at the human's side. When the last presentation ended, the crowd began to disperse in clusters, their voices pitched low. Varric lingered at the edge of the floor. "A fine display," he said, "but the station is not the wilds of your world. Here she is only shadow and teeth." Rian glanced down at Nyx, who met his eyes briefly before returning her gaze to Varric. "You think that's all she is?" Rian asked. "I think a true test will prove the difference between performance and survival," Varric said. "Then we agree," Rian replied, his tone unchanged. "And you'll have it soon." Varric's eyes narrowed. "Do not make promises you cannot keep." "Do not challenge promises I intend to keep," Rian said, turning away. Nyx followed, silent, her tail swaying once like a punctuation mark. As they left the hall, the station's chief of security fell into step beside him. "You do realize," she murmured, "that the moment you opened that crate, you changed the security calculus for the entire station." Rian didn't break stride. "Then I suppose the station just got safer." The security chief gave a low, involuntary laugh. "For you maybe." In his quarters, the lighting was dimmed to a comfortable dusk. Nyx leapt easily onto the raised platform that served as a bed, circling once before lying down. Her breathing slowed, her body a relaxed coil of muscle and fur. Rian watched her for a long moment. She didn't need to be here, didn't need to trust him or choose to stay close, but she did. That choice mattered more than any leash or cage. From the outer corridors came the faint echoes of conversation. The name Nyx, already being traded in voices of curiosity, respect, and more than a little unease. Somewhere in those murmurs, Rian knew, a challenge was already forming. That was fine. The whole point had been to stop the laughter. And from the looks on their faces in the hall, the joke was over. When Nix opened one eye to glance at him, Rian smiled faintly. "Not bad for your first day on a space station," he said. Her tail thumped once against the bedding. Outside, the gas giant rolled on in silence, storms churning beneath a violet haze. Inside, something far quieter but no less dangerous had settled in. A predator's presence that would not go unnoticed, and a man who had no intention of letting the station forget it. The challenge was issued 3 days later. It arrived in the form of a sealed notice delivered to Rian's quarters, its outer layer stamped with the crest of the Predators Guild. The station's regulations didn't require him to accept. Formal trials between species companions were voluntary, but the message inside left no doubt it was meant for him. The simulated environment chamber would be available at the third shift bell. The course would be designed by guild members, testing hunting skill, environmental adaptation, and hazard navigation. The terms were phrased with elaborate politeness, but the subtext was clear: prove Nix's worth or watch her dismissed as nothing more than a theatrical display. Nix lay on the floor beside him as he read, her head resting on her paws. She blinked slowly when he looked down, as though weighing whether the paper in his hands was worth any of her attention. "This isn't optional, is it?" he said aloud. Her tail moved once, the faintest flick against the floor. The viewing stands around the chamber were already filling when they arrived. The chamber itself was vast, a sealed dome nearly 100 meters across, its interior terrain adjustable through a network of mechanical plates and atmospheric controls. At the moment it was a fractured landscape of jagged rock spires, shadowed gullies, and sparse cover, an environment meant to give every advantage to a creature born to stalk and pounce. Guild members stood along the edges of the floor, their expressions neutral, their eyes sharp. Varric was among them, arms folded, his tail flicking slowly. His smirk had returned, though it carried a harder edge now. "You are confident?" he asked. "I'm prepared," Rian said. "And your companion?" "She is not the only hunter in the chamber today." The words were delivered lightly, but something in the tone set Rian's instincts on edge. He glanced toward the control tower, where technicians adjusted settings on a glowing console. Nix's ears twitched once, her head turning toward a patch of shadow beneath one of the rock spires. The chamber's announcement system crackled. "Trial will commence in 30 seconds. Handler and companion, proceed to starting mark." Rian crouched beside Nix, resting one hand against her shoulder. "Stay with me until I tell you otherwise." She made no sound, but the steady focus in her eyes was answer enough. The start signal was a sharp chime, and they moved as one into the broken terrain. Nix flowed over the uneven ground without breaking stride, her paws silent against the stone. Rian scanned the gullies and ridges ahead, every sense alert. The first objective was simple: reach a target beacon placed somewhere in the chamber without being intercepted by the mechanical drones programmed to simulate hostile prey or predators. The first drone appeared less than a minute in, a low, six-legged machine with a blunt head and snapping jaws. Nix angled toward it, accelerating in a blur of black muscle. She struck from the side, claws raking against its armored casing, and the machine toppled with a hiss of sparking circuitry. She didn't linger over the kill, she simply glanced at Rian and waited for the next signal. In the stands, murmurs rose. The efficiency of the movement, the clean execution, it was the work of a predator in its element. They cleared 2 more drones in quick succession. Rian kept his pace steady, his eyes constantly moving, his hand gestures minimal but precise. Nix responded instantly each time, her movements weaving seamlessly with his own. Then the environment shifted. Somewhere above, a bank of vents opened, flooding the chamber with a colder, denser air. Shadows deepened. The rock beneath their feet vibrated faintly. Nix stopped mid-step, her head turning toward the far side of the chamber. The growl she gave was low, not for show but for warning. Rian followed her gaze, and saw movement where there shouldn't have been any. Not the smooth glide of a drone, but the sinuous ripple of muscle under hide. The creature that emerged from the shadows was no training device. Its hide was mottled dark and pale for camouflage, its forelimbs long enough to grip and crush. Rows of serrated teeth glinted in its half-open mouth. It was not part of the trial. Varric's voice carried faintly from the stands, pitched for those nearest him but not for Rian. "An accident of stalking, I'm sure. A creature from the guild's private collection. It will make for a better test." Rian's jaw tightened. The chamber doors were sealed. The handlers on the floor had no weapons beyond what they could carry, and Rian's sidearm had been surrendered at the checkpoint. The alien predator fixed its gaze on them and began to close the distance, its movements deliberate, almost leisurely. It was confident, as if certain the smaller, two-legged figure and his shadowy companion posed no real threat. "Nix," Rian said quietly. Her body lowered, weight shifting to her hind legs. She was utterly still, except for the slow, controlled sway of her tail. Her gaze locked on the intruder, unblinking. "Go." She moved like darkness made flesh, a black streak across the pale stone. The predator reacted late, lunging with claws outstretched, but she was already beneath its reach, veering to rake her claws across its flank. It roared, spinning, its tail sweeping a stone outcrop into shards. Nyx didn't retreat. She pivoted, darting in again, this time leaping high, jaws closing on the thick muscle at the creature's neck. The impact drove both of them sideways into the rock, dust rising in a choking cloud. From the stands came shouts, some in alarm, others in a predator's thrill at the sight of a genuine fight. Rian didn't move from his position. There was nothing he could add now that Nyx hadn't already calculated. The larger predator thrashed, its claws scraping against stone, but Nyx's hold didn't break. She used her weight with precision, twisting to unbalance it, her claws finding purchase again and again in the gaps between armored plates. Each movement was economical, nothing wasted, every strike aimed at disabling rather than simply harming. When the creature finally collapsed to one side, Nyx released it, stepping back with her tail raised and her ears forward. The alien rolled once, gave a rattling exhale and went still. The silence that followed was almost heavier than the fight itself. Then a slow ripple of sound moved through the stands, not applause, not cheers, but the low murmur of a room full of predators acknowledging one of their own. Nyx returned to Rian's side, her breathing steady, her fur unruffled. She sat, glancing once toward the corpse, then back at him. "You all saw that?" Rian asked, his voice carrying without effort. "That's not performance. That's survival." Varric's smirk was gone entirely. He met Rian's gaze across the floor, his eyes narrowed, his posture rigid. The flick of his tail was no longer idle, it was irritation and something else Rian hadn't seen in him before. Caution. The trial's official beacon lit overhead, signaling completion, but no one moved for several long moments. The guild members exchanged looks, their private language of gesture and glance almost imperceptible, but its meaning was clear enough. The human had brought more than a pet. When the doors finally opened, Rian and Nyx walked out together. The hall outside was quieter than expected, the gathered onlookers making space without being asked. Even the security chief, waiting at the exit, gave Nyx a long, assessing look before speaking. "You didn't just pass their test," she said. "You rewrote it." Rian rested a hand briefly on Nyx's shoulder. "Then maybe they'll stop underestimating us." The security chief's mouth curved faintly. "Some will. Some will be looking for the next challenge." "That's fine," Rian said, his tone even. "We'll be ready." Nyx's tail flicked once, slow and deliberate as they continued down the corridor. Behind them, the echoes of the trial would carry far beyond the station's walls. And somewhere, in the watchful eyes of the Predators Guild, new calculations were already being made about humans, and about the Black Panther who walked beside one. The council chamber was not designed for comfort. Its circular layout placed every delegate in plain sight of the others, forcing each to meet the eyes of their rivals. The walls were bare, save for the guild's crest, an abstract swirl of claw and fang, set into the floor at the center of the room. It was a space meant to strip away ceremony until only the balance of power remained. Rian stood just inside the threshold, hands clasped behind his back, Nyx at his side. Her presence had been contested in the hours after the trial. Some delegates claimed she was a security risk, but the guild's bylaws allowed a bonded companion to accompany a challenger to any hearing. The decision had gone to a vote, and the result had been close enough to leave tension humming in the air. The central dais rotated slowly until Varric faced them. His fur was smoothed into precise order, his stance composed, but his eyes betrayed a lingering edge. He had not spoken to Rian since the trial. Now he let the silence stretch as if daring the human to break it. "You risked the safety of this station," Varric said at last, his voice measured. "You placed a lethal predator into a live challenge without full containment protocols, and you did so to prove a point." Rian's gaze was steady. "I didn't release the unlisted creature into the chamber, Varric. You did. Or someone under your authority did. Nyx neutralized it before it reached me." A faint ripple moved through the ring of delegates. The accusation was not shouted, but its weight was unmistakable. Varric's jaw tightened. "The guild does not answer to conjecture. Then answer to the footage, Rian said, and the chamber's display wall flickered to life. The trial replayed from multiple angles, the moment the hidden predator emerged, the way Nyx intercepted it, the absence of any command from Rian. The slow zoom on the upper catwalk caught a figure, one of Varric's own aides, opening a secondary gate in the shadows. When the display darkened, the silence was colder. Jax leaned forward from his seat on the far side. The human is correct. This was not part of the official trial. The guild's honor requires accountability. Varric's gaze shifted around the circle, measuring the lack of support. His tail gave a single twitch before he inclined his head a fraction. An unauthorized act, he said, his tone clipped. The aide will face sanction. The intent was to test the human's boast. In that it succeeded. You wanted her dead, Rian said, the words flat, not a question. Varric's golden eyes met his, unflinching. I wanted the truth. Now I have it. He rose from his seat, stepped down from the dais and crossed the space between them. The sound of his claws against the stone was deliberate, each step measured. When he stopped before Nyx, he lowered himself into a crouch and held her gaze. It was a predator's challenge, one that could not be met lightly. Nyx did not move at first. Then, with a slow precision that drew every eye in the chamber, she leaned forward, the tip of her nose nearly touching his. The air between them felt charged, a thin thread of tension that might snap in any direction. After a long moment, Varric blinked first and lowered his head. When he straightened, the smirk was gone. You have my respect, he said, addressing Rian but glancing once at Nyx. You and the creature you call companion. The guild will recognize the bond as legitimate. It was as close to an apology as his kind gave. The rest of the session was procedural, the guild's official record noting the trial's outcome, the unusual circumstances, and the ruling that Nyx was to be treated as a sovereign participant in any further interactions with the Predators Guild. To some, it was a formality. To others, it was a precedent that unsettled old hierarchies. When they left the chamber, the corridors felt different. Predators who had once met Rian's eyes with faint amusement now gave curt nods. A few even dipped their heads toward Nyx, the gesture brief but sincere. It was not universal respect, but it was the beginning of something far more valuable. They would think twice before dismissing humanity again. Later, in the quiet of his quarters, Rian sat at the small table by the viewport. The gas giant storms rolled endlessly below, lit by flashes of silent lightning. Nyx stretched out on the bed, her breathing deep and even. She had eaten, inspected every inch of their shared space, and decided it was acceptable for the night. You realize, he said to the room, that nothing about this was supposed to happen. Nyx's tail twitched once in the half-light. He thought back to Earth, to the first time he had seen her in the filtered green light of the jungle. She had not come to him then, not for days. He had earned every inch of trust between them. And now, here they were, thousands of light-years away from any forest, proving to an entire station that trust between species could be stronger than fear. The comm panel chimed. He rose, crossing to it, and the security chief's face appeared. You've stirred up more than you realize, she said without preamble. The guild's ruling will be seen as weakness by some. Others will see it as an opportunity. An opportunity for what? To learn from you, she said. To understand how humans forge bonds where others wouldn't even try. Some will want to ally with you. Others will want to break that bond to prove you wrong. Rian glanced over his shoulder at Nyx. She was awake now, watching him. They can try, he said. The chief gave a short, dry laugh. That's what I thought. Just remember, you've changed the rules, Holt. That means the game changes too. When the call ended, he stood for a long moment in the quiet. Nyx rose from the bed, crossing to stand beside him at the viewport. Her reflection in the glass was a black silhouette against the swirling storms, her eyes catching the light. They're not wrong, he murmured. We did change the rules. Nyx blinked slowly, then turned away as if the conversation was concluded. The next day, word spread faster than official channels could keep up. Clips of the trial appeared in private feeds, then on public screens, showing Nyx's movements slowed to highlight her precision. The footage of her facing Varric in the council chamber was already being used in recruitment ads for human-led expeditions. By the end of the week, the Predators Guild had issued an open invitation for human handlers to present their companions for cultural exchange, not as curiosities but as equals in the hunt. Rian was in the promenade when Varric approached again. This time there was no crowd to watch, no formal challenge between them. She is unlike anything I have seen, Varric said without introduction. And you are unlike most of your kind. Rian didn't look up from his coffee. You mean I don't let you get away with things? Varric's mouth curved just slightly. I mean you don't flinch when the shadow moves. That is rare. They stood in silence for a moment, the gas giant's storms churning far below. She'll keep walking beside me, Rian said at last, as long as I deserve it. That, Varric said, is the mark of a true predator. And a dangerous ally. When he left, Nyx emerged from a shadowed corner of the promenade, as if she had been there the entire time. She fell into step beside Rian without a sound. They walked together toward the docking lifts, the crowd parting instinctively before them. Somewhere in the layered noise of the station, someone murmured a phrase that was quickly taken up by others, repeated in low tones as they passed. Never underestimate their pets. The words followed them into the lift, into the quiet hum of descent, into the shared understanding between man and panther that this was not an ending, but the beginning of a longer hunt. Outside, the stars turned slowly, indifferent and endless. Inside, two predators walked in step, their bond sharper than any weapon in the room. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of the station's lights, new storms were gathering, ones they would face together.